What's up everybody, Greg here with LensPro to Go and Lens Rentals. Today we're going to be continuing our coverage of the Varicam LT, diving into the menus and looking at setting this camera up to get shooting. If you haven't checked out the camera video where I cover all the exterior buttons and features, definitely go and check that video out. I'll throw a card to it up right now and then at the end of this video. So now let's dive into the control panel and take a look. So first we're going to start with checking out all the buttons on the outside and then we'll dive more into the menus in a minute. In the top left corner, you have a home button. This just brings you back to this main screen here, which has all of your camera settings, so you can go through and change those on the fly. You have a play button, which just brings back your playback, and you can use the scroll wheel to select through them and choose a clip to play back. Below that, you have a TC or time code button. This brings up your time code settings, and in here you can change it from free run to record one. You can set it to whatever you want if you want to do time of day, or you can do your jam sync time code. Below that, you have an info button. This just brings up any warnings or any system information that you should know about, any channel inputs for audio, as well as what your user switches are set up for on the outside of the camera. Below that, you have a view, and this brings up what the camera is actually seeing. So this is like looking in the viewfinder. It's basically a small LCD monitor that you can use to monitor your framing and get focus from. Along with the picture, you're actually getting all of your settings too. So you have your frame rate, your shutter speed, ISO, white balance, any ND filters if those are on, and then your camera settings, so it's at 4K, 422, as well as your time code up in the top corner and how much time you have left on the card. Jumping over to the right side of the monitor, you have a record button, obviously starts and stops recording. You have a menu button, which gets you into the main menu where you do a lot of your initial setup, which we'll look at in a second. An exit button, which backs up and also exits out of the menu. A scroll wheel, like I talked about, for changing and navigating settings, and then a lock, unlock button, which will lock this main interface so nobody can bump the buttons while you're recording, or if you don't want to change any settings. Now we'll just go back to the home, and then you'll notice on the top here we have 3 buttons as well as on the bottom. Those all match up with the settings that are either below or above them. So this top one goes with the frames per second. You can go in here and then you can use the scroll wheel to select what frame rate you want. Just back out of that. The next one over on the top is the color. And this gets you in so you can set up your LUTs that are going out to SDI. So if you want to monitor on SDI, what you're actually seeing and what you're recording in the camera. The next one over from that is your shutter speed. And this is currently defaulted in degrees, but you can change it to seconds if you like working in that sort of format. We'll back out of that. On the bottom, we have the ISO or EI. You can click that and navigate through all of your settings. On the top here, these switch over to using the native only because this has the dual native ISO. So you can do 800 or 5000. The 800 base allows you to go from 200 all the way up to 4000. And the 5000 base allows you to go all the way from 1250 up to 12,800. And you can also change this from ISO to decibel levels if you're more comfortable working in that. Then on the bottom in the middle, you have your system settings. And this is where you set it up for what codec you want to shoot in, what resolution. You can set up all of your dailies, your camera information, so who's operating it, what the director DP, all of those different settings. And then lastly, on the bottom right, you have your white balance, and this is where you can set up all of your white balance presets for what the toggle switch on the side navigates through. Now let's take a quick look at the other information that this menu is showing us. So you have this little M icon right there. That's your main recording format. So if you had a P2 card in here, it would tell you how much record time you had left. Right below that is the SD card, and that's for recording proxies. And again, it would show you how much time you have left. As you can see on the menu, it says off, and that's telling us that we don't have any proxy recordings set up. Right above that, there's the AVC Intra 4K 422, so that's telling us our codec and our resolution. And right below that, we have our time code that's being generated, and that's just on free run. That's why you see it running right now while we're not recording. Over from that, you have this little film icon and a slate icon. The film one is telling you which card you're on, which is the A002, and the clip below that is what clip you are on that card. Right next to that, we have our project record rate, and we are at 2398. We're also recording currently at 2398, but if we change that to 48 frames per second, then when we played it back at our project rate, we'd be getting that 2 times slowed down image. Above the project rate, we have our battery percentage level, so we're at 90% on this battery. And then over from that, we have some audio meters. I don't have any microphones set up right now, so that's why you're not seeing any levels. The place that you're going to do a lot of your initial setup is going to be in the main menu. Once you get it set up though, you shouldn't really have to go into that menu. A lot of the settings that you're going to need to be able to change is going to be right there on that home screen. So let's open up the menu. And then the first one is your system settings. Going into here, this is where you're going to set up your codecs, your resolution, your anamorphic desqueeze if you're using an anamorphic lens. You're going to change your user switches, pretty much anything that has to do with setting up the camera itself without actually changing camera settings. Hopefully that made sense. because where you're going to be changing those is actually in the camera settings. This is where you can change your frames per second, your white and black levels, any noise reduction if you wanted to have that on, your EI or ISO, shutter, and any lens settings or lens data. Right below camera settings is the scene file settings. That's grayed out because I don't have any scene files set up on this camera. Next is the record settings, and this is where you're going to tell it what you want it to do when you hit record. Do you want the lights to show up on all of the record buttons? Do you want it to make a noise to let you know it's recording? You can also burn in watermarks, do daily information, as well as frame markers and frame guides. Next is the audio settings. This is where you're going to actually have to change the audio levels because there's no interface for changing the levels on the camera itself. It's all digital and through the menus. Kind of a pain to get in here, so I would suggest having somebody who's actually mixing and recording live instead of recording straight into camera. Next is the output settings, and this is where you're going to tell the camera what you want it to do out of the SDIs. So do you want it to be sending a raw signal out? Do you want it to just be for monitoring? Do you want to have information on it? Do you want to send a clean signal? All of that information can be set up in here, as well as what the viewfinder is doing. And you can also change all of those settings for the viewfinder using the buttons on the side and the menu in there. Next up is the file settings, and this is where you can load in scene files and setup files. You can't actually set anything up in here. It has to be on an SD card and loaded from that. After that is the peripherals, and this is basically all the other things that aren't really camera related. So it has like your network, your GPS location for metadata, as well as LAN properties, USB plugs, 4G LTE for network and connectivity, and you can set all of that up in here. And that's the last thing in this main menu setup. If you guys want to dive a little bit deeper into these menus, Panasonic has a great simulator for the Varicam over on their website. I'll throw a link to that in the description. So I highly recommend checking that out, especially if you want to get really familiar with this. If you have a shoot coming up and you want to try it out for yourself, that's a really good way to get comfortable and know the menus and know the setup so you're ready to rock it on your shoot. That's going to be it for today. If you guys want to learn more about the Varicam LT, you know where to go. There'll be links in the description below. And check out the video covering the exterior of this camera if you want to familiarize yourself with all the buttons and ports and features on the outside of this camera. If you guys have any questions about this, make sure to leave them down below. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe for new videos every week, and I'll see you in the next one.